because there's a story I want to tell you. But first I need to take you backwards in time. I need to take you back to September 14th, 1974. That's a date that may not be significant to you, but it was very significant to me because that was my 50th birthday. And my wife, Ethel, threw a party for me that was outstanding. We had 200 of our very most intimate friends come and gather in our home. And we had a band playing, and we had people dancing around the swimming pool, and 2 bars, one up and one down. And the caterers kept bringing food, and it was a wonderful, wonderful celebration. And I really thought that I was on top of the world because I had accomplished every dream that I certainly had had for my life. At the age of 50, I had accomplished every dream that my mother-in-law had for me. And we had a 6,000 square foot house, full-time help, 4 BMWs that were paid for. I had a national reputation in my field, and even an international reputation in my field. And it couldn't get any better than it was. And then just about 6 months later, I thought I was going to die. Because that's when my daughter Judy called me from Boston. She was a student at Boston University. And she called me one Sunday night. Ethel was in the shower getting ready for bed, and I'm sitting in the den with my diary making plans for the next week. And she calls and says, "Daddy, can you speak to me on the phone?" Well, at that time in our lives, we probably spoke to each other at least every day, at least once every day, probably 2 and 3 times a day sometimes. And certainly I could speak upon the phone. But, you know, sometimes when you get a telephone call, you don't know what's happening, the hair on your neck begins to go up. Well, that's what happened in this telephone call. I knew that something was wrong. I said, "What's wrong, Judy?" She said, "Is Mom there?" And I said, "No, Mom's taking a shower." "What is it, dear?" And she said, "Well, I've written you a letter. It's taken me 2 weeks to write. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I was going to mail it to you, but I'm afraid to mail it to you because I don't want to hurt you. So would it be okay if I read it to you?" And you can only imagine what I was going through. I knew something was wrong. I said, "Wait a minute, sweetheart. Let me get a pad and pencil." And I did. I said, "Okay, what is it?" And at that point, she began to share with me some events that had taken place in her life over the prior 9 months, which led her to the decision that Jesus is our Messiah. And I've got to tell you that when she said that, it was like a knife being placed right into my heart. I kept saying, "Judy, this is impossible. This is impossible. You're Jewish. You can't believe in Jesus. It's impossible. You can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus. You can't be a Jew and a Christian at the same time. You can't go north and south at the same time. What's wrong with you? Don't you understand this is impossible?" I have to stop now to give you some idea of why my reaction to what she was saying was as intense as it was. My parents, how many of you have seen Fiddler on the Roof? Have you seen Fiddler on the Roof? Okay, most everybody here has seen Fiddler. Well, the town of Anatevka, it was very much like the town that my folks came from in Russia. My father and my grandfather, my uncles, came to America in 1904 to get away from the Cossacks. Do you remember the scene in the movie where the Cossacks come in and it's time to get the Jews, and so off they went to get them? And to get away from that kind of hatred, my folks came to this country. They worked for 2 years, saving their money, and in time they had enough money to bring the women folk over, and they did. My grandmother and my mother and the rest of the women in the family and some of the children who had been born came to America, settling on the east side of New York, and then they began a new life. I've got to tell you about my grandfather, Isaac Baskin. My grandfather was a chimney maker in Russia, but on the east side of New York, there's very little opportunity for employment for a chimney maker who doesn't speak English and has a beard down to here. So at the age of 50, he quit. He gave it all up, and he let his kids take care of him. But I was called a Christ killer for the first time when I was maybe 5 years old. We were living on the east side of New York at 35 Market Street, not too far from the Brooklyn Bridge. And I didn't have any idea what that was. I didn't do it. I didn't know what you were saying, didn't know what they were saying, but I recognized the hatred, the anger that was in their voices. And so I remember running home to my mother and running up the 6 flights of steps to the apartment and crying, "Mama, Mama." And my mother took me in her arms and comforted me, and half in Yiddish and half in English, saying, "Zunele, Zunele, my little child." It's all right, you're safe here. But you have to stay away from those Christians. You have to stay away from those Christians. They hate us, and they'll always try to hurt you. So stay away from them. Stay here where you're safe. And I learned that lesson. And then just a few years later, as we prospered, we moved from the east side of New York to Brooklyn, New York. And this time we were living in a 4-story walk-up, not a 6-story walk-up. And I remember I was now about 9 years of age. The summer before I was 9, that's exactly when it happened. We were playing ball in the schoolyard down at the corner, and it was noon, and it was time to go home for lunch. So I started home. It was a July morning. I'm wearing sneakers and shorts, and that's all. And I was a skinny little kid. And I remember walking home, maybe 150 or 200 yards from the schoolyard to where we lived. And I remember as I'm walking along, I see this lady coming towards me. She's all dressed in black. It's a hot July day. She's all dressed in black, wearing a black hat, carrying a black book, and carrying a black purse. And as she's walking towards me, her eyes just freeze on me, and they freeze me. I didn't know what to do. I just stood absolutely still, transfixed. What's happening here? And she marched right to me. When she got near me, she stepped to the side, took her purse, and smacked me across the chest, knocking me to the ground and saying, "Get out of my way, you dirty little Jew." And again, I didn't understand why she hated us, why was she so angry, what had I done? And I remember running home to my mother, crying as I went up the 4 flights of steps to her. And again, I remember my mother taking me in her arms and, Zunala, you're safe here, don't worry, you're all right. Stay away from those Christians, stay away from them, they hate us. They'll always try to hurt you, stay away from them. So I give you that background not to put anybody into condemnation, not to get you upset, not to make you angry, but to give you some idea of what my mindset was, what my worldview was, where I was coming from. And what I'm hearing on the telephone is my daughter is telling me that she has just left us and joined them. She's left us, the Jewish people, and joined our enemy, the Christians, the people who are oppressing us for all of these thousands of years. And my heart was breaking. How could you betray us this way? How could you do this to us? And the more she talked, the angrier I got. And finally I realized there was no point in carrying the conversation any further. So I said, "Look, sweetheart, you're coming home in 2 weeks for your spring break. We'll talk about it then, okay?" And she said, "Okay, Daddy." And then she said, "I love you." And I said, "And I love you, Judy, but I don't understand what you're saying. I don't understand how you could be saying these things." Well, of course, meanwhile, Ethel had finished her shower. She came from our room into the den where I was sitting, and she heard my end of the conversation. She dashed into the kitchen, and I could hear her banging cabinet doors and slamming pots and talking to herself. And when I finished my conversation with Judy, I went into the kitchen, and we just looked at each other and fell into each other's arms and wept. How could our child, a child raised in our home, a child raised in a home of love, in our Jewish home, how could our kid do this to us? How could she do this to her, not only to us, but to all of her ancestors? How could she betray us this way? And we didn't know what to do. The next morning, Monday morning, I called a rabbi, a friend of mine, and I asked him if he had a few minutes to talk on the phone. I probably kept him on the phone for half an hour, rattling out the story of what Judy had told me. And he kept saying, "Stan, take it easy. It could be worse." I said, "How, Rabbi? If it was your daughter, it would be worse?" You know, what's going on here? He said, "Look, she's a good Jewish kid. You've raised her properly. You've raised her in a home of love. She'll come back. Somebody's got to her. They brainwashed her. You just stay there. You stay steadfast, and she'll come home."